Hey guys, how you doing today? Welcome back to my YouTube channel where we explore all sorts of interesting topics like UFOs, remote viewing, crop circles, interdimensional phenomena, and more. So, here is the video I promised you about what we learned at the recent Society for Scientific Exploration meeting in Las Vegas 2018 combined with IRVA, International Remote Viewing Association. There's a section of this meeting that was devoted to UFOs, and we had doctors Hal Puthoff and John Alexander. I'll just be speaking about what Hal told us about UFOs. To sum it all up in one sentence, yes, they are real. I don't know any other way to put it. Hal doesn't beat around the bush. I've met Hal a number of times over the years at the SSC and IRVA meetings that have been going on since I got involved in around 2000. And Hal's talk was what we've learned about these materials and the To the Stars Academy program to find out more about what we know about this phenomena. So basically what Hal told us is the phenomena is absolutely real. And he did go as far back as the closing of Project Bluebook. And he went through very quickly some of the previous government programs, Project Sign, in the 48, 49 time period, then Project Grudge. Sign said, yes, it is real. And the engineers at Wright-Patterson signed off, said that, the phenomena is real. We can't explain it. It's not anything we understand. It's not foreign powers. It's not our own vehicle. Grudge didn't like the people, the Air Force didn't like that interpretation. They had Project Grudge, which basically said, no, it's not real, and it's all just common explanations, weather balloons and meteorites and all that good stuff, flocks of geese and Venus and whatever else you can come up with. And then Project Bluebook concluded, that there's no military significance to this, and we can explain 80% of it. Don't ask us about the other 20% that we can't explain. And then they had Edward Condon right here in Boulder, Colorado, at the University of Colorado. He was hired to kind of shut the program down. We know from internal documents that the purpose was to basically make it look like a scientific review of Project Bluebook, Sign, and Grudge, and determine what had been found from these studies. And then Condon said, there's nothing really to it. There's no indication it has any significance militarily, and we can explain it away, and we think the government should shut down Project Bluebook. But what Hal pointed out to us is when Project Bluebook was shut down in the official memo that accompanied the shutting down of Project Bluebook out of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio, General Carol Bolender wrote a memo saying, of course, we know that reports with defense significance never went through Bluebook to begin with, right? And Hal mentioned this. He read us a quote from the Bolender memo, which, UFO researchers have been pointing this out for quite a while, and Paul Dean on his blog in Australia, UFOs Investigating the Evidence, has been showing us the alternative systems, the service system that allowed pilots to report UFOs without going through Bluebook, OPREP, three-way bases would communicate with each other, and so forth. And these were alternative mechanisms that allowed the military to deal with UFO reports without actually saying that they were UFO reports. And so these all bypassed Bluebook. It's basically the really good stuff bypassed Bluebook. And obviously, even though Bluebook was shut down, these other channels weren't shut down. I know the service system was used until about 10 years ago. And perhaps there are alternative systems in place here. Because as Hal pointed out to us, the government's always been interested in UFOs. It's just not an easy phenomena to explain, and I agree with that. From my other videos, I think this could be a multiverse phenomena. It's not the physics behind it, the science. It's very complex, at least for our little primitive mammalian minds here. So Hal pointed out to us that even though these programs have existed, they're covered up. They're covered up because of the obscurity of the language. They're not called UFO study programs. Now, case in point here, you've heard, I imagine, if you're watching this video, of the ATIP program, Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program that we found about from the New York Times article last December 17th, 2017, right? ATIP. Well, as Hal pointed out to us, that was the nickname. It wasn't called ATIP, and if you do a FOIA request, Freedom of Information Act request, you aren't going to find very much about ATIP as far as I know. It was under a program called Advanced Aeronautics Weapons Special Applications or something like that. The point is that these things are hidden under very complex acronyms that don't tell you what the program is about. And of course, I imagine that's a classic technique for hiding something in plain sight that you don't want other people to see. So the point is that even though we know about the ATIP program, and Hal didn't say this directly, but I'm just kind of inferring from what he said, there could be other programs like ATIP that we still haven't heard about. We did have Harry Reid come forward and tell us about the ATIP program. But again, it didn't say in the New York Times article this was a nickname. Okay, but that's what it is. So these programs do go on, and Hal was put in charge of trying to find out the science and technology behind how some of these vehicles and unacknowledged aerial phenomena, UAPs, whatever you want to call them, advanced aeronautical vehicles, AAVs, okay, creatures from space, whatever you want to call them, it's real, and the government does have ways of studying this without letting us know that they're actually studying it. So in this case, Hal thought the evidence is very convincing because he says this forms, it's a fusion study. You have so much data. You've heard the pilots come forward, the F-18 pilots, from the Nimitz incident from 2004. And Hal pointed out that you have the radar data from the electronic data. These objects apparently are stealthy, that they don't appear on radar. But you have electronic data from the other ships in the carrier group. You have airborne surveillance systems, and you have the pilots. He said you have gun camera footage, though in this case, guys, we didn't see any gun camera footage. We just saw the Raytheon FLIR footage, which is kind of reversed image since it's just sensing heat. And so Hal really felt that the evidence in this case, and I really get the feeling they're just starting out with releasing the evidence, but it's coming from so many sources that it's really hard to deny. As he said, our ability to ignore these phenomena is increasingly vanishing, to paraphrase him, because we have so much data from different sources that these objects are real. So why don't we hear more about this? Well, it's interesting. You and I would think they're covering something up, they don't want to talk about it, but it's actually a little more complex than that. Apparently, nobody really wants to be publicly associated with these phenomena because it's not career enhancing. And people that work in government agencies and bureaucracies, pretty much any organization, mostly are thinking about career enhancement, right? And so you're thinking how you're going to work up the ladder of the particular company or corporation or government organization that you're working for. And if this isn't enhancing your career, you're not going to go forward publicly about it. Now, we did have all the folks in the To the Stars Academy group come forward, but some of them had to retire, like Luis Elizondo, to actually come forward with about this. Chris Mellon had just retired. So you had all these individuals that personally were interested in this, and they did get the support of Harry Reid to actually get some funding to create a study around this. And the way they study it is they put out requests from experts, scientists, technology to find out how these actual vehicles, how they work. Now, a second issue with this is that there's so much compartmentalization within government intelligence and military organizations. I imagine this exists anywhere in any country, that it's stovepiped, as Hal said. So we have all this stovepiped information. People in other stovepipes don't talk to the other stovepipes, and we don't end up finding out about it. And so it's stovepiped, it's not career enhancing. So basically, this is why we don't hear about this more, even though this should be a front topic in public discussion. It's a public policy issue. I mean, how do we deal with these phenomena? And how do people who've encountered these phenomena deal with it? I mean, this is what, for me, Black Swan Ghosts, my book was about. I mean, you have all these individuals that have encountered this phenomenon, and yet there's nowhere to go to talk about it. So how do these actual craft work? Well, this was really fascinating, I have to tell you. Hal really put it out there with this topic. And what he said is they actually bend space-time. They re-engineer space-time such that they're not operating with the same speed of light constant that we are. In other words, the materials of these craft that they've looked at, and he showed us the bismuth, magnesium, zinc metamaterial that came from some crash, perhaps allegedly it was Roswell. Very fine layers of metal, and when you put these metals together, they act in such a way that they interact with the vacuum constant in space, which basically means since the speed of light is c squared equals 1 over 2 vacuum constants multiplied. If you change the vacuum constants, you've changed the speed of light in the vicinity of that craft. And so it creates what he called blueshifting. Now, you're familiar with the idea of redshift, right? From distant galaxies that are receding away from us causes a redshift, and the faster they move, the greater the redshift. But this is blueshifting, and this is why some of these objects appear so luminous, so bright. In fact, that one I saw over Wyoming with Stephen Greer on that Skywatch was very blue. Well, now we know why. Because they shift the frequencies of the electromagnetic spectrum due to a slight change in the space-time metric around them, that things that are in the visible light spectrum get shifted to ultraviolet, and things that are infrared get shifted to visible light. So these objects are going to look really weird and bright. And that's what they do. And this explains why people get burned by being around these objects, why they experience a kind of a sunburned effect. Gary, the former missile security guard at Minot, who I have another video about, described being burned and the other guard in their security alert team truck when they went out to look at one of the missile silos and this bright object took off. This explains a lot. Now, this isn't the only type of material that exists, but this is the only one we're being told about. I've talked to other people over the years, other types of crashes, and perhaps there's other materials that are involved. But in this case, we're talking about blueshifting, and that the speed of light, though it may be constant with the vacuum components that we're used to being fixed, if you change the two vacuum components of the quantum field, you're going to actually change the speed of light for your particular vicinity. And so therefore, these objects are going to be traveling faster than the speed of light for us. For them, we'd be traveling slower, and they're going to shift all these frequencies, and you get this so-called blueshifting. I think that's really quite a mind blower. In fact, you can look. This is the interesting thing. All of these topics have been put out there over the years, but they are couched in such a language that you wouldn't know that this is actually UFO research, and perhaps the people that were involved in this research weren't told exactly what the request for the information was for. You would read this research, perhaps some of it would have been declassified, but you wouldn't have known that the point was to figure out how the UFO works. I mean, just look at this article that Hal mentioned from, it was the Journal of British Interplanetary Research. And in this particular article, I'm just looking one of these on the archive.org site. Advanced space propulsion based on vacuum, parentheses, space-time metric engineering. And it starts out by saying, a theme that has come to the fore in the advanced planning for long-range space exploration is the concept of that empty space itself might be engineered so as to provide energy thrust for future space vehicles. Now, if you read that, you just think, oh, this is people involved in future space exploration trying to figure out how they're going to get to distant places. But no, it's actually looking at how do we actually explain these UFOs that we have crash material from. So I think it's very interesting stuff. And Hal told us that the point of the To the Stars Academy program is to form a public benefits company so that the material can't be classified again and put back into someone's basement. Very interesting. So that this way the public owns it and it can't be buried again. So let's hope that's what happened. Now the fun didn't end there, because as soon as we were done with John Alexander's talk, who followed Hal, who talked about similar programs that he had attempted to find in the 80s but never uncovered, perhaps because they're so compartmentalized, we got a chance to go to Bigelow Aerospace. Bigelow Aerospace being right there in northern Las Vegas. Now, Bigelow Aerospace makes these modular crew capsules that could be sent aloft on rockets from Earth and help people get into space and do experiments and so forth up there. And it was quite fascinating. We weren't allowed to take any pictures. But Bob Bigelow is someone who's been associated with this topic for quite a while. We actually got to meet him as we went into Bigelow Aerospace. You remember, you might have seen him on 60 Minutes. Last year, 2017, in the summer, he went on with Laura Logan and said, yes, ETs are real. They're right here, and I'm not afraid to say it. My own parents had a very close-up daylight encounter with one and filled the whole windshield of the car. It was that big. And in any case, we got to meet Bigelow, but we didn't learn anything about these materials. Bigelow was mentioned in the New York Times article and has been associated with this research for quite a while. However, the purpose of our visit there was to look at the inflatable crew capsules and so forth. But Bigelow was a contractor to the ATIP program. It was the official contractor for working with ATIP. He put a lot of his own money into the particular program. And so we know he's connected with these materials. Now, going in, one of the guards that checked our IDs on the bus as we went in did ask us if we had any questions. So I said jokingly, do we get to see the ET materials? And he said quite seriously, there's some buildings here even I'm not allowed to go into, which I thought was quite an admission there. And I asked our tour guides about it too, and they just kind of laughed it off. But I can tell you from a reliable source that the materials are there at Bigelow. And these are these different metamaterials from different crashes. That's what I've been told, at least. And it would have been nice to see the building where they are or something like that, but perhaps that's for another day. So all in all, very interesting meeting and trip to the site of the metamaterials, where they're stored at least. And I imagine, folks, that this issue is something we're just going to be hearing more and more about slowly. I mean, they're really the cat's out of the bag at this point. And it's worded and presented in such a way that it doesn't cause any kind of overly panicked reaction, I would imagine. I mean, even the To the Stars event never mentioned UFOs. They called them UAPs or AAVs. So if the public's a little confused about this, I don't blame them. All I can say is I thought that between the visit to Bigelow and Hal's talk, we learned quite a lot about this phenomena. And it's actually amazing how much we don't know about this topic. That's really the important thing here. I got the feeling from Hal's presentation there's just so much we don't know. And the bismuth magnesium material being just one of many possible materials. We didn't hear about the other types of materials, but basically we're dealing with vehicles that can directly interact with space and time, something that we haven't achieved yet. And this would explain why they just seem to appear and disappear take off like a bullet, as we're told the Tic Tacs did, and so forth. And I'm looking forward to looking at the future evidence as it comes forward and seeing what this sort of tells us. So if you've got any comments or questions, I'd like to know, and put it in the box below. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you again soon. Take care for now, and bye.